What happens when the new teacher with a bad reputation picks the wrong old woman to mess with? Rosa had been at Westwood High for over 30 years, teaching history with a patience that had weathered generations of students. She had seen trends come and go, watched bright-eyed kids turn into doctors, lawyers, and even teachers themselves. She had also seen troublemakers, bullies, and those who thought authority was theirs by right rather than by respect. But never had she met someone quite like Mr. Calloway. He had arrived just 2 weeks ago, already draped in whispers and rumors. A teacher who had been dismissed from 2 schools, though no one knew exactly why. A man who carried himself like he owned the place, walking through the halls with an air of entitlement, as if the decades of dedication and hard work of the other teachers meant nothing to him. He wasn't just arrogant, he was cruel in subtle ways, his voice dripping with condescension when he spoke to staff, his comments always just shy of outright insults. And now he had chosen her. Rosa had just finished grading a stack of papers when she heard the sharp knock at her classroom door. She looked up to see Calloway leaning against the frame, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Mrs. Rosa," he said, deliberately leaving off her last name, as if she were just some old woman instead of a respected educator. "I hear you're the queen of this place." She set her pen down carefully. "I'm just a teacher, same as you," he chuckled, stepping inside. "Oh, I doubt that." His eyes scanned the room, the walls lined with historical maps, old books, and pictures of students from over the years. "You've been here too long." Rosa arched an eyebrow. "Excuse me? I mean, isn't it time to retire? Leave some room for fresh ideas? I heard from a few students that your teaching style is outdated." A silence settled between them, thick and heavy. Rosa folded her hands over the desk. "You've been here 2 weeks, and you think you know how I teach?" Calloway shrugged. "I know how schools work. The old guard clings to their way of doing things, afraid to move forward. You probably still make them memorize dates, don't you?" Rosa sighed, shaking her head. "You think history is just about dates?" "I think history should be rewritten by those who understand it better." Rosa looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. "Mr. Calloway, let me tell you something. The real problem isn't old versus new. It's people who think they're smarter than everyone else, without taking the time to listen." Calloway's smirk didn't waver. "You can't teach an old dog new tricks, I suppose." She took a step closer, her eyes locking onto his. "And you can't teach a man who doesn't respect wisdom." That was the first encounter, but it wasn't the last. Over the next few days, he made his presence known. He interrupted meetings with long-winded opinions, dismissed students' questions with sarcasm, and laughed when younger teachers tried to correct him. Rosa watched as the school adjusted to his presence, some teachers avoiding him altogether, others too polite to push back. But Rosa was not like the others. It happened one afternoon in the teachers' lounge. A few staff members sat scattered at tables, murmuring about their day. Rosa poured herself a cup of coffee, her back turned when she heard his voice behind her. "You know, Rosa, I don't get it." She didn't turn around. "What don't you get?" "You. Everyone tiptoes around you, like you're some kind of legend." He leaned against the counter beside her. "What's your secret?" "You bake cookies for the principal." A few teachers glanced up from their lunches, the tension in the air thick. Rosa stirred her coffee. "Respect," she said simply. Calloway snorted. "Please, you don't get respect just by sitting around for 30 years. She finally turned to face him, her calm gaze meeting his. "No, you earn it, something you wouldn't understand." His jaw tightened, but the smirk stayed. "You talk big, but at the end of the day, you're just an old woman with a stack of books. What are you going to do if I don't show you respect? Give me a detention?" Rosa sipped her coffee. "No, I'll just wait." "Wait for what?" Her words lingered in the air long after she had walked away. The moment came sooner than expected. A week later, a student, a quiet, diligent boy named Daniel, came to her after class, his hands shaking as he held a crumpled piece of paper. Rosa took one look at his face and knew. "What happened?" she asked gently. He hesitated, glancing at the door. "It's Mr. Calloway. He called me stupid, in front of everyone." Rosa's grip on the paper tightened. What exactly did he say? He asked a question about the reading. I got the answer wrong, and he said, "Well, Daniel, I didn't expect much from you anyway. Some people just aren't meant for advanced classes." Rosa closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the anger settle into something sharper, more controlled. She patted the boy's shoulder. "Go to lunch, Daniel. I'll handle it." She found Calloway in the hallway between classes, standing by his door. He looked up as she approached, his smirk already in place. "Ah, Rosa, what can I do for you?" She stopped in front of him, her voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk." "About what?" "Daniel." Calloway rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on, the kid needs thicker skin. The kid needs a teacher who doesn't belittle him." His smirk faltered for half a second before he recovered. "Oh, please, don't act like you've never been tough on students." "Tough isn't the same as cruel," she said, her voice like steel. "You humiliated him. It's not my fault if you're not fit to teach." That shut him up. For a moment he just stared at her, his arrogance flickering into something else, something less certain. "Excuse me?" Rosa stepped closer, her presence unwavering. "I've seen teachers like you before. You think power comes from making others feel small. You mistake fear for respect. But you'll learn the hard way that fear doesn't last." A few students passing by slowed, sensing something unusual in the air. Calloway glanced around, his posture stiff. "You're overreacting." Rosa smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "No, Mr. Calloway, I'm just getting started." By the next morning, the entire faculty knew what had happened. By the end of the week, the principal had received multiple complaints from students and parents. Rosa made sure each one was documented, compiled, and impossible to ignore. Calloway had built his reputation on intimidation, but he had underestimated the resilience of those he tried to diminish. The students spoke, and this time, someone listened. By the end of the month, Mr. Calloway was gone. No farewell, no ceremony, just an empty desk and a nameplate removed from the door. But Rosa knew that wasn't the end. The students still carried the weight of his words, his belittling, his erosion of their confidence. Daniel still hesitated before answering questions in class. Others still whispered about the fear he had instilled. The damage he left behind was not so easily erased. Fear lingered in the silences, in the averted gazes, in the flinches when a voice was raised. So Rosa didn't stop at Calloway's departure. She rewrote the narrative. She gave Daniel extra encouragement, making sure his voice was heard. She spoke up for students who had been silenced. She reminded every young mind in her classroom that they mattered, that they belonged. She introduced debates, open discussions, and creative projects, all designed to rebuild their confidence. When Daniel hesitated, she waited. When others doubted themselves, she pushed gently but firmly. She made sure they knew that their thoughts, their words, and their presence mattered. And soon the whispers about Calloway faded. In their place were voices that rose with newfound confidence, students who dared to speak, to question, to learn without fear. But then, late one evening, as Rosa sat at her desk grading papers, a knock sounded at her door. She glanced up to see Daniel standing there, clutching another sheet of paper. Only this time, his hands weren't shaking. "I got an A on my essay," he said, his voice steady, proud. I wanted to say thank you." Rosa's throat tightened, but she managed to smile. "You did that yourself, Daniel. I just made sure you had the space to prove it." He nodded, his shoulders squaring before he turned to leave. And as he walked away, Rosa knew. Because some people in this world you just don't mess with. And Rosa? She made sure no student under her watch was ever made to feel small again. Long after Calloway was forgotten, long after his cruelty was reduced to little more than a footnote in their memories, Rosa's influence remained. It was in every confident answer given in class, in every hand raised without fear, in every student who dared to believe they were capable of greatness. Because in the end, true power isn't about making others feel small. It's about showing them how big they can be.